Plugin of the week comes from Plugin Alliance. It's the Unfiltered Audio SpecOps. Spec standing for Spectral Processor. It's a spectral processor, and what it does is it has 36 what they call performance-focused effects. And this allows you to essentially create an insane amount of effects that work within particular frequency zones or frequency areas. What you'll see is sort of something of a spectral analysis, although it'll kind of take on a lot of different shapes. You can select different colors for it. We'll get to that in a little bit. Let's start with the basic signal flow, so you kind of understand what's going on and what you can set up, and then how it all configures. Essentially, it kind of flows from left to right in terms of you got the input gain here and the output gain here. So those are your starting places. One of the most important things is the window, or the spectral window with which it works. And what you have is a bunch of numbers that look very familiar: 128, 256, 512. And these are kind of buffer or window sizes. What's interesting about this is this sort of will create a lot of the resolution of the effect, and depending upon the effect that you apply, it will have a different characteristic sound. So as you go up higher to the 32,000 setting, essentially the spectral window ends up being pretty big, almost like a full second. And when you go down to 128, it's obviously chopped down and much smaller. What happens here is when you have rhythmic effects, this will have a tendency to be a bit more accurate in terms of that and the way that that works. But when you go up here, this will be leaning more towards quality. And so where you can kind of swing things to be lo-fi heading this direction, and then you can swing things a little bit more hi-fi and in the other direction, and depending upon the effect, it will have different results. It comes as a default of 1024, and we'll start there, but whenever you set up an effect, if you kind of toggle back and forth between some of those settings there, you'll find some interesting things. Now, the window in the manual, it just says window in parentheses, and it's just the way that I guess it's works, so that you see some kind of different descriptions here of what the window is like. And again, we'll kind of toggle through a few of those things just so you can kind of see what's going on. So this sets up the whole stage for everything else. Here you have a speed, and this is it's kind of an interesting effect. It kind of creates a feedback on the spectral frames that are in the section up above. And what this does, when you hit the freeze, it allows you to capture a particular frame. The size of that will be determined by what you set up over here. So again, I'll kind of display that. So this allows you to freeze audio in any particular given section, and the speed determines how much they sort of, cross over or feed back into each other. So you'll kind of see the effect of that again. As you go across, then the next section is the geometry section, and this gets into pitch shifting. So you have pitch shifting. This actually works in semitones, going up and down, and then so it works harmonically rather, and then this works inharmonically. So this is shifting, not trying to necessarily maintain pitch in a musical sense. And then you have a stretch feature, and this is sort of like an kind of a compressor expander type of effect, not in terms of like dynamic volume dynamics like you would expect, which we'll go over here in this particular section, but in this sort of time stretching sense. So you'll kind of see how that plays out as well. So just the combination of these, without applying any of the other effects, can have a really dramatic effect. So what happens is you go gain, you go through all these different settings here, and then it goes up to 3 effect stages before going to the Spectral Expander. What you have here is a variety of different effects. You have a stage of different filters, different what they call mixing effects. So these deal with more amplitude type of stuff. And within different frequency zones. So we'll kind of get into a little bit of that. There's a geometry here, so this is a little bit harder to describe. Freezers, right? So these are different freezing effects. You got glitching effects, and then something that's just called effects. Some of these are really kind of cool. They're probably hard to describe. That's probably why they put them in a separate category there. When you select an effect, you have an amount control here. Oops. So you can change the amount of that effect, and you could change the start. So you could start to see here, now I've created a spectral window, and from this window I can actually close a front end and a back end. So when I apply an effect, I can apply it within a particular frequency range, and depending upon what I selected, it may work on stuff outside of this range and leave that empty. So there's a there's a lot to sort of digest here. And so we'll start by, working with full frequency, and we'll just kind of go through some of the basic things here. All of that, and you have 3 different stages of it, will then feed into a compressor expander. Now, normally when you see the term compander, it's like a term that was used for like noise reduction technology, where you might compress on the input and expand on the output exactly the same way. So this was a way of getting rid of noise or tape hiss. But here, it's just connected to the ratio. So if you have sort of an inverted ratio, then what ends up happening is you have expansion instead of compression. And all the other settings essentially kind of work from that in normal kind of things, with an automatic gain control if you select that. This kind of keeps everything sort of contained or in bay. So that's really where that's helpful. But you can also create some interesting effects with that as well. The mix wet dry is right near the very end. You have a filter effect here. So this is a filter on the high frequency. When you start to create some of the spectral effects, it can kind of create some noise up on the top end that you may want to filter down upon. Very cool sounding filter. I'm not sure if it has some kind of resonance on the top of it. It kind of sounds like that, but it actually is really tight. Very good sounding one. And then you have an output gain, which makes up for whatever's left over. Now, as if all of this wasn't insane enough and all the possibilities, you also have a modulation section. So if I turn off the modulation section, you notice that these little dots disappear from all the different things. When I open up the modulation section or turn it on, now you'll see these dots. And this allows you to create connection points. So if I wanted to modulate, say, the amount of an effect, you could see it now modulating, and that will work relative to the position that I set it at. So this allows you to really take any type of element of the setup here and move it. Now, it's for some reason, hold on, let me just... Oh, there we go. Okay. So by dragging that away, clicking on the thicker part of it, it's like pulling the cable if you don't attach it to anything else. So it's a way of undoing it. Okay. So now that we got this, I just want to go through some basic things with it. So what I'm going to do here is just mute down some stuff. So we'll just essentially have a drum loop for right now and kind of work with some things, and then I'll show you a bunch of other stuff with it. All right, so if I start doing some things like here, if I just, so that's just freezing it. Now the area that I freeze, if I happen to select a big window, it'll, right, which is kind of cool, but if I select a smaller window, I'll be getting something that's much lower resolution, right? So you get the idea of how the freeze and all of that is connected. So already you can see how it could start to get nutty. So let's just kind of play around with some other stuff here. So again, here, if I start to shift, or if I go up to a higher resolution, and that will go all the way down an octave, right? So now this doesn't even get into applying a modulator to it. So, if you wanted to do that, you could start to take on, the idea, maybe just have it actually do an input followers. Right, so you can already get a sense of the insanity here with it. There we go. Let me just remove that. And then you got... So this is the inharmonic. Really just turns it into something completely different. And then there's a stretch control. So just that alone, again, so when you start combining all these effects, you can see how you can really morph this to, a whole insane, crazy kind of world, and then even get into the different windows, which will kind of shape some of that a little bit. Now, when you get to some of the effects and you start working with some of the effects, maybe take something here. Let's just take something, a little bit lower key here, so we can so I can set an amount. This is lower key, by the way. So now I can isolate where that effect comes, so it's not affecting the kick drum. And then you start to get into things where if you start to have that so and there you get to other kinds of effects that are let me just take that away, where they're focused within particular ranges. So if I just started toggling through different types of effects, some of them will have different, like sometimes you'll switch to a particular type of effect. You have to play with it, and if you start so again, you could see how how this just gets to be insane as a reverse effect. There's also some freeze effects. Some effects like this, like a threshold, will be the amount control may figure in. And when you start piling on some of these effects, just right after each other, we could see how it starts to get crazy, like in terms of the possibilities with it. And this is without going into, and there's so many different effects here. You can really have a lot of fun with this if you understand, though. And one of the things that I found in working with this for a bit is that I play a lot with the Fft size. Right, so this this sort of window area, and then sometimes this will also change the colorations of it as well. So if I find something in particular, let me go back to something particularly annoying. See if I can make it less annoying. right? So that inverts the effect. So you can see here how this will affect what's going on or what it is that you're trying to do, and then so this speed, again, which is like a kind of feedback control on the spectral frames, you know, allows you to mix it up. And then, of course, you still have the wet-dry control. I think you got a small sense from all of this, just like, you know, how crazy you can get with it, and some really cool effects with it that you can create. I was playing around with this a little bit, and I had, let me just kind of take that down for a second here. And I had, you know, within the context of a whole mix, I was just kind of playing around with a few different things. Some stuff was just presets and very rough, but just to show you how, like, you can take like a mix, a somewhat more normal, straightforward mix.
Man, I've been around the corner trying to make it around the world. Where you going? Hey, tell me where you're headed, where you going? Man, I've been around the corner. Nah, man, I've been around the corner trying to make it around the world. Where you headed? Hey, tell me where you going? We gon' take it around the world now. Hey, we gon' take it around the whole entire world. Hey, we gon' take it around the world. Look, I think we can take it around the whole entire world. I was been around the corner. Man, I've been around the corner trying to make it around the world. Where you going? Hey, tell me where you're headed, where you going? Man, I've been around the corner. Nah, man, I've been around the corner trying to make it around the world. Where you headed? Hey, tell me where you going? We gon' take it around the world now. Hey, we gon' take it around the whole entire world. Hey,
not sure where that line is coming from.
We gon' take it around the world. Look, I think we can take it around the whole entire world.
Even if I had taken this,
I was been around the corner. Man, I've been around the corner trying to make it around the world. Where you going? Hey,
just in effect, it's not actually that preset. I think I started there, but it's essentially a smear effect. And this is the noisify effect with the 256 FFT size. Which, you know, takes it in like a whole different direction. And if you have like some things here, like with the drums, what I had done was just put a little filter on the top, just so you get a sense of what that's like. And you can really turn this into a performance thing. When you actually open up the modulation section, you can actually tie different things in you know, including external controllers, and if you're I have never used it, but the Rolly light pad, you could use that, and you know, so you can kind of feed things in from different sources to kind of use it more as like a performance, almost like a DJ type of thing within an effect. But, and then of course, obviously you can automate any of the parameters and stuff like that, work with it from that angle. If you want to work with it from that angle, you know, program the stuff in, record it all in, and then, you know, have it be part of whatever it is that you're working on. But you could just see how you could really reshape sounds and kind of take something, go like a completely different direction with it and get unique. Very, very cool one. It's one you can very easily get lost in, and really amazing. Just kind of blows my mind. Every time I use it, I pick up some other little thing or some other way of using it. Very in-depth. Didn't even get too far into the modulation section. There's just kind of so much in there that you can really dig into. But yeah, totally blew me away. And that's why this is plugin of the week from the Plugin Alliance. Unfiltered Audio's SpecOps.